Charlotte, here.
Special meeting of the City of Grand Forks for Tuesday, August 19, 2025 at 5:24. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Mark Olstad. Here. Council President Brian Morrison.
Here.
Council Vice President Tim Rainfeld.
Here.
Councilmember Stanley Schumacher.
Here.
Ben Bakrzywinski.
Here.
Dale Collins. Donald Tucker. Karen Peterson.
Here.
We have a quorum. Please turn on your microphones. We'll move on to item number 1. Discussion on the 2026 budget. The budget information has been distributed here among the folks in the room. Reed, if you wouldn't mind, I guess we would turn it over to you to start the conversation.
Great. Thanks, Council President. Members, we'll go through kind of a presentation tonight. Carla and I will. If there's anything as we go along the way that you'd like us to stop and clarify or give more attention to, please feel free to stop us. And then we'll certainly have time for discussion at the end. Goal tonight is really just to give you a snapshot of kind of how we ended 2024, remind everybody what our 2025 budget looked like, and then high level what the preliminary proposed budget for 26 looks like. The full detail kind of general budget packet that usually goes out. Carla's putting the finishing touches on that with respect to the presentation tonight. We'll make sure that we get that sent to all of you after the meeting tonight or first thing tomorrow morning, so you will have some time to review it, understanding there's going to be some future work sessions and discussions that can be had, so you'll have time to fully digest and understand the budget as it sits today.
And of course, if you have questions, you can call either one of us at any time.
Okay, so 2024, where we ended the 2024 year, we collected a lot of back taxes that from previous years, property taxes that had not been paid, and had a few areas where some of our expenditures were a little lower than anticipated. Most of those either staff related or largely due to a pretty mild winter, lack of snowfall, not much snow to move, so we had less overtime. The lower utility cost within a lot of our public buildings because it was a pretty mild winter. So that helped our bottom line, our budget. And in the end, because of a couple of those factors, our general fund reserve balance increased by $943,000 to close 2024 year end. So we talk a lot about our general fund reserve percentage. We usually talk about that as a percent of our revenues, the goal being 35 to 50%, and we are estimating 24 year ended at 62% of revenues. So well more than 6 months worth of revenues available in our fund balance at 24 year end. As we look at 2025 at a glance, the projected total revenue was $13,711,000 and change. Total expenditures was budgeted at $14,091,000 and change. Our property tax levy was set at a 3% increase from 24, and that dollar value was $7,137,984. That does include, in order to balance that budget, revenue over expenditures, to come to a balance, we did include budgeting an expense out of our reserves of $478,318. We'll just note that at the value of 1% of the levy for our budget last year, that 1% levy value was about $69,000. So that $478,000 budget expenditure represents about a 7% tax levy. So again, as we look at what 2026 may look like, understand we basically set ourselves with an operating budget of about a 10% levy increase from 2024. The combination of tax levy increase and reserve expenditure. Questions on any of that so far? Okay. We'll look a little bit just at some of the tax levy history. Over the years, this is as far back as our budget history goes, is back to 2002. Just kind of wanted to show a little bit of the ups and downs in years where we have set lower tax levy increases. We look all the way back to 2012, we did a 0%, and then 13, a negative levy. and slowly had to climb up to that, where we ultimately got to 2016 and 17 to be in a pretty substantial levy increase. We just thought it'd be important to point this out as we talk about how to best use our reserves, and understanding that our reserves have grown year over year, finding the right balance and combination between how to use reserves to buy down the levy increase, so to speak, as we did in 2025, but not get ourselves caught that all of a sudden we've used reserves and now we're looking at another large increase like we had to close to 10 years ago.
Reed, looking at all of this, had we not done those negatives in, looks like 2009 and 2013, and just maintained, a nice average, have we looked at what that would have been? Would that be like 3% or 5% or 6%, or what would that number be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't done that calculation. Just quick looking at it at the top of my head, I would guess it's in that 5-6% area if you spread that out over the last 10 plus years.
Sure. All right, thank you.
But we can run that and get that for future meetings.
I think it would be good for future planning that we can, do some sort of a study on the effects of what 2009 and 2013 had on the budget, which caused this massive pain that came, for the next 3 years after that.
Yeah.
To avoid that scenario again, because as a homeowner in town, that's just not sustainable.
Correct. Right. Absolutely. Any other comments, questions on that? Okay. 2026, just quick snapshot revenues as we're estimating them today. For the sake of the discussion, we did just start with a 3% levy increase being included. That represents that revenue increase of $214,139. I'll kind of point to the bottom of the slide. A 1% levy represents this year, as we talk budgeting, $71,379. The way we come to that number, you may ask, is by taking this property tax levy from the current year we are in and breaking that down by 1% at a time. So that's the value of the 1% levy for this year. 2026 local government aid did see a very slight increase from 25. So that number is $2,468,772, not quite $6,000 more than 25. For those of you that have been around for a long time and remember all the history, just to point out, our LGA in 2026 will still be lower than what we received in 2014 by a few thousand, close to $50,000. And in 2014, LGA represented about 27% of our city's general budget. That number is now reduced to closer to 16%. So kind of one of those, again, a little bit of one of the uphill battles we're facing that shines importance on when we talk about LGA at the state level, how important it is to communities like ours.
I know LGA was a discussion for the state's budget. Where did they end up on that? Are they reducing the amount of LGA that is going out?
Right, no reduction. There was a discussion about a statewide reduction to that. It did get, that proposal was removed kind of at the last minute. Okay. So basically LGA this year going into 26 was left untouched. At the coalition conference a few weeks ago in Bemidji, it was a hot topic and one that the coalition leadership expects will be a continued discussion point as the state continues to fight its budget deficit battle. But for this year, it was kept safe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There are a few reductions in revenues I'll touch on. Those are the red columns here, some of the reductions. The largest one to point out being charges for services. And I'll start with that. I think we still have a little bit of work to do on that one. The biggest reduction there that we see is specific to rents in our park and rec facilities. Understand we have the ICE project going next summer. We've typically generated a lot of revenue, rent revenue, with ICE rentals in the non-traditional ICE season. So that has been accounted for. We're still working through some calculation as we look at the expense side, some calculation to balance what that might be. And Jeremy's working hard on contingency plans as we learn more about the scheduling of the project and can one arena maybe stay in a little longer while the other one comes out and the project gets started? So there's some movement that still will happen over the next few months and what that looks like, but we did want to make sure we accounted for some loss of revenue in that area. The other one that's in that category that sees some loss is there's a proposed reduction to our allocation for drug task force payment to cover some staff. That at this time represents about a $12,000 decrease from 25. And if there's questions to that, Chief would be able to speak in more detail at the appropriate time to do so there. On the expenditure side of things, the total increase to expenditures as it's proposed or estimated today represents about a $638,000 increase over 2025. I did highlight a few on the side. These are all still variable, understanding that we will be negotiating new collective bargaining agreements with all 4 of our unions this year. Those conversations have not started yet. They will over the course of the next couple of weeks. We did build a expected or a proposed increase into the budget to try to account for some of how that discussion may go. And that's represented in the 3 categories: salaries and wages. We're estimating an increase of $322,000. That's the combination of full and part-time, as well as any movement on steps of employees and a COLA included in that. Health insurance cost, we're representing about a $130,000 increase to that. That is still largely an unknown, as you're all familiar with that have been involved in past years. It's usually into the 4th quarter before we start to see the true healthcare cost proposals. Mid to late October is when we expect we will see them for ICRA. The preliminary number we're working with on that is about a 20% increase, understanding that ICRA is an age-banded model, so everyone will go up some just by being a year older on the plan. And then Blue Cross in Minnesota proposed a 16% increase to their ICRA rates. That could still come down as they finalize those rates, but those are the numbers we're working with today. And then lastly, 2026, January 1 is the start of paid family leave in the state. And so we're representing or expecting about a $56,000 expenditure to be able to fund the paid family leave program through the state. All of that brings us to kind of a bottom line. Again, we included a 3% levy. That's shown and accounted for. As it stands today, all of the projects and operations salary shows an $862,301 deficit. So to balance the budget as it stands today, we're looking at about a 15% levy increase, if it was all put to a property tax levy. Questions there? If there are no questions there, the next few slides, I'm going to just kind of go through some of the general fund vehicle equipment type expenditures that are planned for the next year and some of the capital financing impacts that those might have. Okay. So a list here, these are projects that are pieces of equipment that are budgeted in the request for 2026. The fire department would be looking at a new pickup at a price of $60,000. Parks department to replace a 1990s model pickup at $65,000. The police department would be looking for drones for $9,000, drone or drones. 800 radio system for police. An SUV to replace the existing patrol pickup that we have on the street. And the plan with that would be to transition the pickup into being the school resource officer vehicle and ultimately retire that school resource officer vehicle that, remember, was a seized drugs seizure forfeiture. That's a tough word tonight.
You say that twice really fast.
Yes. Yep. Transit, a new Class 400 bus, that would be just the city's match. There would be some state aid and some federal aid to go along with that, but that's the city's contribution there. And maybe I should pause there. Those top 5 or 6 items, starting at the police SUV and up, those of this list are largely the ones that we haven't had on an ongoing basis, or there aren't some tied to already. The example, the transit bus being, those are largely scheduled by the federal and state replacement program. So there's a general fund expense to it, but we don't have much option in saying yes or no to it. When the funds are available, they need to be planned for. And then as we go down the rest of that list, the police department taser program, that's an annual equipment update that's kind of over a 5-year contract. So we're committed to that as it stands today. The police department interview recording equipment replacement, that would be a one-time expenditure to replace aged equipment. And then the department computers and software, again, that's kind of on an ongoing basis. We budget $30,000 for computers and $18,000 for software every year to replace on a rotating basis the hardware and software across the city's departments. And then lastly, the Public Works annual street maintenance budget at $290,000. That we have been incrementally increasing every year by $10,000. Up to next year, we would plan to go up to $300,000. Assuming the budget allows for it. And then we'd probably take a moment to pause at $300,000 and just see how that account can sustain itself and see how much work Public Works can continue to get done with that. They've been pretty successful the last few years in being able to get, those are the city specific, just city funded street repairs. We got to pull a panel out here or there, do a quick overlay on a bad stretch that had a frost boil or something each year that we just handle on our own, not specifically tied to any state or federal aid projects. Okay, and then the next slide, I just wanted to give everybody kind of a snapshot of the capital financing fund. We talked about this a few months ago as we were preparing to order I think it was a motor grader or a payloader we were preparing to order. And just wanted to kind of show the representation of the annual payment as we make the upfront capital purchase, how we spread that annual payment typically over 9 years. And that commitment then becomes a general fund expenditure commitment. Some of these vehicles may have some tie to another enterprise fund, but generally, for the purpose of tonight, consider it as a general fund item. The two to point out are kind of the darker green lines. Those are the two that are scheduled for 2026. At Public Works, the fuel island and pumping station is in need of upgrade, and looking at replacing a 2,000 year mower within the Parks Department with a new broom attachment to go with that. So those would be two larger vehicle or mobile equipment type expenditures that we would spread out over the course of a payment plan rather than hitting it all at 1 year.
Reed, this is where we borrow the money from ourselves and then pay it back over the 9 years with general fund dollars. Okay.
Yeah.
Correct.
The only thing is, like, if we have radios, we only do those usually over 5 years, just because of the technology changes.
Yeah.
But most equipment is depreciated in 10 years, so purchase it the 1 year and then you pay it back the other 9.
Got it.
And that's kind of, I think, the highlight to make sure we point out here is just as we look at this bottom line, these are committed payments, with the exception of the two green lines that are up for discussion for next year's budget. The rest are all committed payments that are already committed to that fund, with the bottom line general fund impact shown across the bottom. Okay. Then lastly, the building maintenance fund for 2026. Showing kind of the next 5-year snapshot of proposed projects out of building maintenance. I will make a pause and point out the building maintenance fund is not specifically tied to the general fund. That's funded through a transfer from water and light each year of $400,000. 2025 was the first year that they had increased that to $400,000. But showing the projects that are anticipated, current estimated year-end balance of about 409,000 with the projects we have on the docket for 25. And then ultimately, we're planning to exceed that expenditure in 2026 if all of these projects would move forward as planned. And that would ultimately, if we follow that path, we would need to talk about kind of the long-term, next 5-year snapshot of building maintenance and how willing are we as a council to spend this account maybe into a deficit to get some projects done, knowing that there's a healthy reserve balance as one option, and that the building maintenance maybe over the course of a couple of years could rebuild itself using the general fund reserves as kind of that secondary coffer. Okay. Those are the slides that I have to cover, just kind of next steps. Certainly open for discussion. Understand that this is really high level and that you haven't had time to dig into the details. We'd certainly want to make sure you all have the ability to do that. Next steps going forward, we do plan to bring back discussion at the work session next week to speak to the budget again. We'll go into some more detail on enterprise funds that are separate from the general fund, those enterprise funds being the refuse collection that we've talked about in recent months, stormwater, wastewater type funds, the flood protection system as part of that. Yeah. So we would bring that discussion forward at the 26th meeting, along with any general fund items that you all see desire to dig into further. And then looking ahead at having our preliminary levy set certified prior to the September 30th deadline. So we've got a couple of regular council meetings to be able to achieve that, and recognize that the final budget doesn't need to be certified until the end of December. Once we set a preliminary budget, that number from September till December can be reduced but not increased. So as an example, last year, I think we started at a preliminary of 10.5% and worked our way down to 3%. That's all I've got, unless there's questions or discussion. Carla, anything that you'd like to add?
Only that the handouts you got were, we went over the ones on the slide, and this is just the printout of the other projects you talked about, so. And I did highlight them so they kind of match. You can see the payments and the one-time year purchase.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Mayor Olsted.
Go over, would you just say 71,379 was 2025 for the dollar amount for one levy?
That'd be the cost, the price for 1% for 26. Yeah,
Okay, I just
we
wanted to make sure.
use
Yep.
25 levy to establish what that value would be for 26.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay, any other questions or comments at this time? Okay. Thank you for putting this together and walking through it in a very clear manner. This is very helpful. Okay. Okay, lots of good conversations here in the next few weeks, I'm sure, and throughout the rest of the year. So thank you for putting this together. If there isn't any other questions or comments, we'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Riopel.
Second.
Second by Pukshavinsky. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Special meeting is closed. Thank you, everyone.